Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I'm going to be making a video about something a little bit different. So usually I take games that people have sent in to me, or I take the games of grandmasters that people recommend to me to do videos on. But I got a request to do a video about some opening ideas for the Grunfeld to go through that. And so I'm going to go through, just give a quick rundown of some of the main options that are kind of some of the main lines. And then I'm going to look at the main line that I recommend against the Grunfeld and what I like to play. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at that. So a few things to say about the Grunfeld. So first of all, I used to actually play the Grunfeld as the black pieces, so I'm kind of familiar with it. And I also have played against it as white, so I've played it from both sides. So I have kind of a rounded idea of it. I know what I like as both sides and what I don't like. So what becomes comfortable through either side, I kind of have a decent idea of. One thing is that if you want to play the Grunfeld, it's good for players that like tactical games. You know, say you like if you're as the black pieces and you like, say, like a Sicilian defense, you'll probably like the Grunfeld because a lot of the times the dragon Sicilian, with the dark squared bishop, it kind of resembles the Grunfeld a little bit in some ways, And so there's some things you like active positions, good for that. And one thing to remember is if you play the Grunfeld, that the dark squared bishop is very important. So for black, if you have the bishop, because most of the time this bishop is very unopposed on this long diagonal, so this is a very important piece. So that's one thing that I just want to make sure gets noted. So very rarely do you want to exchange it, because most of the time this bishop winds up being the best piece for black. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's start looking at this. And then I'm going to show you a game of mine, because that's the best game I found to show you the variation I recommend. And, obviously, because if it's the variation I recommend, then I've played games from it. So I found a good one. Okay, so main moves, d4, knight f6, c4, just gaining space, just normal opening theory, knight c3, because you want to play e4. So then here's where black denies that with d5. Okay, and real quick, the first deviation that could happen in the Grunfeld, so this leads to the main line. One quick possibility, if we go back, instead of playing knight c3, you can potentially go with g3, and this leads to different positions than the Grunfeld all around, because your idea is you just want to play a more simpler game, and you're not going to get the same tactical positions that you get in most Grunfeld defenses. Okay, but knight c3 and d5, because this is the main kind of moves here, and d5, because white's threatening e4, so black denies with d5. C takes d. And this is the main move for white. Here's a couple of variations though. So one version that white can play is bishop to g5. This is one of those sidelines. Say black is just playing automatically, not paying attention. Things can get a little bit out of the territory that he's probably familiar with. Something like this can happen. And if I was playing as black and something like this happened, this isn't what I would be used to, and I probably wouldn't like this, and I feel that black could do better. And so with bishop to g5, the best move is usually knight e4, and white doesn't usually want to take, because if takes and you get the pawn on e4, then this knight can't come to f3, which is usually where it wants to be. And so yeah, there's some more unusual things. This is kind of one of those sidelines that you should be aware of. And if you want to play black, you should know about this. Okay. one other possibility, after, let's see, d5, instead of playing c takes d5, which is the main move, the other option is, of course, there's knight to f3, bishop g7, and queen to b3. This is another one of the more main lines, because this is the Russian variation. This is a little bit of, this is probably the second, I'd say the second most common after the main, the main version we'll get to. And something like this happens. White wants to play e4, and he wants to get his pawn duo in the center, and so he's gonna have big center. Black's gonna try to attack it, and very dynamic game. It's gonna happen. Okay, so the last option is instead of c takes d5, the other option would be to play e3. And this line doesn't offer as much of a challenge to black, but it also kind of slows things down. And if you're playing as black in the Grunfeld, you probably want a faster game. So, lots of tactics, lots of dynamic possibilities. And this is going to kind of cut those down. And so sometimes white says, well, this is going to be what black doesn't want, so maybe I should try that. But, of course, doesn't offer really as much for white, but also doesn't offer really much for black either. And, yeah. So it's kind of a slower way of playing that doesn't challenge black as much, but yeah, it's still slightly better for white. Okay, so those were some quick sidelines. And so main, c takes d5, knight takes d5, e4. Okay, so here we go. So possible is knight to b6. That has been played, but it's not quite as great as the main move, which is to take on c3, and b takes c3. Bishop to g7 is played in this game that we're looking at. Okay, so a couple of things to note about this position. So white has the big center, and so he's going to have more space in the center. But black says, instead of saying, oh, you have a big center, black says, ha, you have a big center. That's a big target. I'm going to hit that with everything I have, and then I'm going to try to make it collapse. And, so that's what the game is going to revolve around mostly. Can black destroy the center, or can black hold it? Or can white hold it? Okay, so here are some other choices. Once we get to this position, there's a few more branches to theory. So one very popular variation is bishop to c2, or bishop c4, c5, something like this, and knight e2. So you want to put the knight on e2 a lot of times. People like to play this way. That way there's no bishop to g4 pinning the knight. You can just go ahead and play f3. So, so if, something like the castling, bishop g4 to, maybe try to remove the knight from the defense of the pawn, you just play f3. Okay, so after bishop to g7, here is where I'm going to give my two recommendations for what you should play if you are playing the Grunfeld. And so if you're playing as the white pieces, these are what I like to do. So the one option, this first option is going to be a little bit for the more conservative. You want to play, something that's not risking as much. Then I say bishop to e3 is a better approach, is a good approach, because I've seen a game of Karpov where he played this, and yeah, so if you like slower, more positional ideas, this might be a good one. Because some things like let's say here's a sample of something that you want to try for. Castling, say queen d2, and you play queen d2 to defend this pawn. And here's the reason why. So say black plays c5, you can play d5. Bishop's no longer threatening along this diagonal, not threatening this, so nothing's happening there. And now this pawn on d5 you could say is strong. So I've played this way before, and I had good success with it. I don't know, maybe some people don't like it, but I say this pawn can be strong, you know, and because if say e6, then you know, obviously you don't take, because you know if black ever takes, then you get a protected pass pawn potentially after, you know, c4, and yeah, I've had good success with this. Okay, so the bishop to e3, and you know there's plenty of other ideas you can try out with bishop to e3, but yeah, it's definitely a top option I suggest, because I like it. But now for the main version that I suggest that I play as in white. If I'm white, I play this way. So my recommendation, this is a more aggressive option. I tossed in bishop to e3, you know, in case you like more conservative options as white. But this is my weapon. So I play knight to f3. So one thing, if you play this move, you have to be ready to gambit, because if you're not okay with that, then this variation won't work out so well. But here we go. So c5, and yeah, so obviously black wants to hit this center because he needs to try to hit it quickly. Otherwise, he's just, you know, he could just get steamrolled. And then here we go, rook to b1. So we're gonna see the point of the so. Here we go. Black goes ahead and castles. Just bishop e2. C takes. C takes. So notice this diagonal is open. So queen to a5 is played. So, you know, the rook being on b1 no longer defends this pawn. But now we allow this fork, and we don't even worry about that. So one thing you can also do is you could always go queen d2, and you know, something like this. And this is not as ambitious. I mean, definitely, of course, obviously playable, but not as ambitious as the move I play, which is bishop d2. Just don't care about the pawn. So if black, and here, if black takes, castling. And this is all from a game of mine, by the way, we are following. And this is how one of my games went. Okay, so just castle, and so here let's take a look and look at these imbalances really quick here. So we have sacrificed this pawn on a2, but let's take a look at the imbalances. Yeah, so down a pawn, but let's look at how many pieces that black hasn't moved yet, and this is the entire queen side, pretty much hasn't been touched. And now let's look at black's activity compared to ours as white. So we have a rook on this nice open file. Both bishops have been moved. Maybe they're not the most active right now, but they have still been moved. This knight's developed. Our king is castled. The only piece we haven't touched yet is the queen. And you know, one thing to note here is that this rook also is kind of limiting the activity of this bishop, because it can't just move out. Otherwise, we just kick the pawn back. And one thing also to note is these two pawns are passed, so you know, there's no pawn really stopping them. They can become very dangerous in an endgame. If you make it to an endgame, that is assuming if you make it to an endgame, because this is very, very much risky for both sides. There's a lot that can happen. So if you make it to an endgame, these pawns are pretty much an endgame killer for white, because two connected pass pawns on the queen side are very difficult to stop. But remember, that's only if you make it to the endgame, because black has a lot of problems to solve before he can make that happen. Alright, so b6. b6 is played. And yeah, so this is just to stop the danger to that b7 pawn. I think one idea in this position actually that has been tried is just running this pawn, because it can be a little annoying to stop. And I think a game I actually played this position as both sides. I've played it, this is the exact position from both sides. And I think one time I tried a very similar idea where I just started running the pawns without trying to solve all the problems over on other parts of the board. And I think it wound up being a draw. But but that is one idea, because you have these pawns, you can just start running them, and they can be difficult to stop. Okay, b6, and play bishop to g5 here. So I was playing as the white pieces, and I think the player I was against was maybe close to 1700 at the time. Okay, bishop g5, so, just saying, hey, this pawn isn't defended. I'm going to activate my bishop while attacking you, making you react. And then here's a not so accurate move, knight c6, because I can just play d5 to kick the knight away from the defense of the pawn. And after knight e5, knight takes, all these captures, then I get a pawn back. So now it's really even material, but I've gotten it back with interest because now my pieces are still more active. So yeah, so this kind of stuff can happen very easily because there's a lot of weaknesses to worry about. Rook e8, and yeah, so this pawn is passed. So it also only has 3 squares to go. So I played d6. Now it's notice it's defending the bishop. And all these, it's all hooked up. Okay, and now only 2 squares to go to queen. Maybe I can make something happen. Bishop to e6, and bishop to b5. So I do have this passed pawn, and so now this other bishop comes in and is active as well. So everything's being very, very active. And also this is a passed pawn. So if you have a passed pawn, usually the most important thing is control of the square in front of the pawn, because you want to start pushing your passed pawns. And so to push, you need control of the square in front. Okay, so rook e8 was played, d7, and yeah, so there's not really a good way of stopping this pawn. Yeah, move played was bishop takes d7, which probably is best because there's not really a clear way of stopping it. And yeah, after bishop takes d7, black is now in quite the material trouble here. Yeah, down a bishop for a pawn. So after bishop h4, queen to a5, rook c1, here is where black resigns. Yeah. So, these 2 pawns are passed, but if they were a little bit farther down the board, maybe they could create some problems even with the down of material, because 2 connected passed pawns are very dangerous. But in this case, there's just not really a whole lot for black to keep playing on. 'Cause yeah, down the bishop. So yeah. Anyway, so this is the end of this game, and that kind of shows some of the dangers, some of the rapid piece play that white can get in the B pawn, or no, the A pawn sacrifice variation. I don't know if that actually has a real name, but anyways. So that's what my recommendation is if you're brave to gambit. If not, there's also that one with bishop e3 that I like as well, for you want to play more slowly, more more conservative. Both options are great. There's also a few other options in there. If you want to take a further look at some of those other sidelines, those are also good too. Yeah, but it all depends on what you like, really. If you like positional chess, maybe go for the one bishop e3, or also just go for maybe the g3 type ideas, because those are also good. It all depends on what you like when it comes to openings. All right, well that's gonna be it for this one. Okay, yeah, I hope you get to try out some of these ideas in your games. Let me know what you think. Maybe you're able to use one in one of your games. You win, let me know. If you don't, get a win the first time, keep trying. If you try out a new opening, you might not have good results the first time. Sometimes it takes a few times as well, So So, you know, maybe you try out one of these ideas. It might not stick the first time. Sometimes you got to keep working with an opening, and then you can turn it into a weapon of mass destruction. But it takes some practice sometimes. Okay, so that's all for this one. I think that's all I really have to say about this for now. All right, thanks for watching.